A lot of young brown people will comment, how did you even end up where you are today? If you're truly passionate and truly care about something, fight for those opportunities. All those little steps, I don't know if I would have necessarily taken them in that order if I wasn't trying to fight for something different than what I had always expected out of my life.
Preethi, welcome to Post Run High.
Hello, thank you. Happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you. For everybody listening, Preethi and I just came from the treadmill show. We ran a little under 3 miles. We're feeling good. Endorphins are flowing.
Yep.
How are you feeling post our run?
Actually feeling really good. That woke me up.
Yes.
I feel like that's what I needed.
For context, for everybody listening, Preethi is a content creator, runner, lives in New York, has been here for 10 years, similar to me. We both went to college here, and Preethi and I met through the content world of running. We're both runners. We love documenting our running journeys online. How else would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, that's about it. Lived in New York for a while, have a fun community of friends and life and sport and fitness. Yeah, that's a pretty good summary, honestly.
Let's use this podcast to kind of unpack everything about you. Take us back. Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in Maryland, outside of DC. So also kind of city, like close enough to a big city that I got to experience what a metropolitan lifestyle kind of feels like. But when I graduated from college, I just really wanted to get out of Maryland. I was like, I love my family. I love it here. And I'm so thankful for the community. But at the same time, I had always been someone who wanted to travel and see the world. And even my parents were like, you always wanted to go and be independent. That's how my family has always seen me. And when I started applying to colleges, I honestly just applied to every school that I knew, which was randomly a bunch of Ivy Leagues, which my GPA was never high enough, NYU, and then a handful of liberal arts colleges. And I wanted to pursue international law, which was very random, but at the time it was a path that I felt was a way of giving back to the community and doing something bigger than myself, which I think is ultimately what I was looking for in my life. So I applied to a bunch of liberal arts colleges, NYU, and then all the Ivy Leagues. Didn't get into any of the Ivy Leagues. Got into almost all of the liberal arts colleges that I applied to. And then also randomly got into NYU. And that one,
which is a great school,
is an amazing school.
Yes.
When I got in, my parents were like, oh my God, my brother's friends sat me down and were like, we don't know how you got in, but you have to go.
But I love this because you were out here shotgunning the Ivies, you know? So I'm like, NYU is a great place to land,
yeah.
Right? What made you want to just apply to the Ivy League schools? Were you like, well, let's see what happens?
I think it was just the pressure of that's what was kind of expected of me growing up. And I was honestly.
Wait, let's unpack that. Yeah. Because, so for context, both of my brothers went to Yale. I was the complete opposite. I was the artsy kid in the family.
That was literally me.
Okay, so Let's unpack this. So talk to me, because I feel like we have a lot in common here in a way, but I feel like your family might have pushed academics even more.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this. And I'm saying that based on what we talked about on the treadmill show.
Yeah.
Okay.
My parents definitely were very much focused on studies. I think especially in the immigrant brown community, my parents came to this country and wanted to afford me and my brother a better life than they could ever have imagined for themselves.
And your parents moved here from India.
Yeah. My dad moved here in the 80s. It's actually a crazy story. He was a marine biologist, and he wrote a dissertation on a dolphin, and it went viral for the PhD community time.
Does the dolphin have a name?
No, or I don't know if it does.
I don't know why I asked that, because I'm like, what if there is a chance that it has a name and we can shout out that?
That would be so crazy. Yeah. Oh my God.
Okay, continue.
But that dissertation kind of went viral for that time period, and he got traveled around the world to present about it, in Europe, in the US. And when he was in the US, he became friends with the marine biologist. Her name was Dr. Eugenie Clark, and she was the first female marine biologist to swim with whale sharks. And she was a really big deal at the time because that was like a big achievement, and she had connections with the Smithsonian Museum. So she got my dad a job at the Smithsonian in DC, and that's how he moved to America.
Wait, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And just to ask kind of a question off of the marine biology thing, was he like a scuba diver as well?
Yeah.
Wait, that is so cool.
Yeah, I have pictures. I can send them to you after of
Yes.
him like in the scuba equipment. Actually, this is a total side note, but when he did the scuba diving, he was a vegetarian for most of his life and then started eating meat because he started to feel like super weak and lightheaded because of the like physical strain. And for me, after my first marathon, I had been vegetarian for like 12 years and I started eating meat because the physical strain on my body. And I was like, a lot of my followers on TikTok are like, you don't need to eat meat to like run. And I'm like, yeah, you don't. But like, pretty sure I have a genetic predisposition from like my dad having that experience and then me going through something similar. Like, he even is like, yeah, you're my child. Like,
yeah. Blame it on him. No, but I get that because it's so true. It's like when you are going through something that's so rigorous on your body, it is important to figure out like what is going to make me feel my best. Like how am I going to get my protein intake in? And
fuel.
And
at the
fuel,
end
yeah.
of the day.
I mean, yeah, you can't be a long distance runner and not fuel your body
Yeah.
properly. So it's all about figuring out things that work for you.
Yeah.
While being vegetarian might work for other people for long distance runs. And I know there's a lot of professional athletes that are vegan, vegetarian. So
And it works really well for them. It's just
depends on
the person.
exactly.
Sorry, I completely
Wait,
took
that's
that
so
on a
cool.
tangent.
No, I love that tangent. Okay, so he was a marine biologist and he ends up moving to the US.
Yeah.
What about your mom?
So then my dad became a part of this like Indian church community in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. And they're like, that community is basically like my family. Like the aunties and uncles they raised me and my brother. And
I love
like,
that so much.
whenever we come home, it's like they like for Thanksgiving, they're the families that I'm going to be hanging out with, you know.
And in your family, is it just you and your twin?
Yeah.
Siblings-wise? Okay, that's so cute. Preethi and I are both twins.
Yeah.
Both fraternal boy twins.
Yeah.
Also. Love.
Such a small world also. That's so
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, and we had the same heart rate throughout our entire treadmill workout. So I don't know if that's a long distance runner thing or a twin thing, but it was weird.
We're basically the same.
Yeah.
Same in different fonts.
yes.
So my mom, her best friend was cousins with one of the aunties in that church. And within the Indian community, like back in the 90s, there was a lot of like arranged marriages within the like community. So those two aunties started talking. My mom was working in Saudi Arabia as a nurse. There's like a big immigrant community that goes out from South India to the Middle East to like make money and then send it back to their families. And that's like basically what my mom was doing. And then she gets a call from her best friend being like, hey, there's this guy who I think you would get along with. And they connected them and they started to like do phone calls. My mom like complains that my dad was like, and he was like 2 or 3 hours late to the first phone call. But then they ended up talking for so long and my dad was using like coins to pay for the call because it was like the old phones and he used all his coins to just talk to her the whole evening.
Wait, I love that. So they just had a connection right off the bat.
Yeah.
Wait, that's kind of nice.
It
Because
was
that's
sweet.
like, it's nice to connect with somebody within your community, but in your own way.
Exactly.
Right? And like really feel that genuine connection.
Yeah. So then they like went to India, got married, came back.
Oh my God, I love Indian weddings.
Yeah.
So cool.
The first time they met was like when they were in India for their wedding.
What? Yeah. Oh my God, that's long distance to an extreme.
Yeah. And then they
Wow.
came back. So like my mom came here and she was like, this is a whole new world. All she knew was like India and Saudi Arabia. And then she came here. She didn't know anybody except for my dad, and then was like thrown into this whole new
That's
country.
so wild. I'm curious to hear about, just we're side questing for a
Yeah.
second here, but goes to India to get married to your dad after really starting their relationship through phone calls, never having met in person. Has she talked to you about what that experience was like for her as such a young girl? You know, I know you said later within the community, but
Yeah.
I'm 27. You know, like I think
know.
about that. I can't even imagine like going to India and getting married, having never met the person face to face.
Yeah. My parents actually, surprisingly enough, don't put any pressure on me when it comes to relationships. Like, they, within our community, normally, because I'm 29, and that's older for women within our community, but they, like, really don't put pressure on me. And I think a lot of that is because when my mom came here, she like was so excited, but she didn't fully realize how much she was going to have to sacrifice for this new life that she was going to build. And I think asking that of anybody is like a lot.
Yeah.
But I think she also was so excited about the opportunity that she had in front of her, and
Like to get married and to move
get
to the
married
US.
and to move to the US. Like,
Yeah.
that's all she had ever dreamed of.
Did she say when she met your dad in India for the first time, was it love at first sight? Was she like, oh my God, I can't wait to build a real like family with this?
him.
Yeah.
It's funny because she always jokes that when she got off the plane, she should have pretended she had a limp to see like how he would have reacted.
That's so
Like,
funny.
that's so crazy.
Has she described their first interaction to you? Like, what does she say?
Yeah, she like was like, yeah, I just like was shy. I didn't know what to say. I guess like she like walked up with her older sister and her husband. So it was my Periapa and Periyama. That's how we say it in Tamil. And I guess she wouldn't talk to my dad at all. So like my Periapa had to talk to my dad the whole time and like was like basically
She's
hanging
probably
out
like
with them.
nervous.
Yeah. They have
Oh.
their wedding video too, which like we watch every year for their wedding anniversary.
Yeah.
And it's so funny. Like the expressions that both of them are making. Like my mom is so like nervous, you can tell, but then like my dad is so excited and like so in love with her, and like it's just like the funniest, the reactions. You're like, you can tell they're like are just getting to know each other, but also
Absolutely.
like so excited about the fact that they're getting married. So
Right.
yeah.
Would you ever be down for an arranged marriage if it was somebody within your community that you had a close friend being like, I really think you would have a connection with this person?
That's a good question. I don't know. Cause like I also feel like my life is just so different now. It's also like hard to date in general in New York as a content creator. Like
And just in general.
in general.
Yeah. It's tough out here.
It's tough out here, but I feel like being a content creator has made it even tougher because I'm just like, I don't know how much of this person actually knows about me without me knowing before I go on a date with them. I've had like people on Hinge and stuff match with me and like be like, oh, like I watch your TikToks, and then I'm immediately like, nope, like I don't want you to actually follow me or think that you or have a preconceived notion of who I am based on my social media channels.
Right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like whoever you end up with is going to have to like accept that this is your job and like you share certain parts of yourself online. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword because it's like you don't want them to come in with a preconceived impression of you, absolutely. But at the same time, you want the person that you're with to be able to look at your social media and be like, it's so cool that like
Yeah.
Preethi's expressing herself in this way.
And be proud of me and excited about
Yeah.
it too. And like,
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe I'll have an Instagram boyfriend one day.
Yeah. No, there is something about, I always feel like certain relationships, it is a nice balance when one person is online and the other person is like totally not online at all. Yeah.
Honestly, my best dating experiences most recently have been in that vein.
Yeah.
Of like,
I feel like I see you dating somebody with like a very traditional job.
yeah.
Because it's like you're so creative. So it's cool. I always think like, I had somebody say to me once, like finance bro and artistic girl is like a great combo. And it really is.
Yeah, because it's like one evens the other out.
Yeah. Or opposite, finance girl, artistic guy. Like
Yeah.
either or.
That's kind of like, my brother tends to be kind of more type A, and his girlfriend is like very chill, like laid back in every way, shape, and form. And I think they even each other out in a lot of ways because of that. Like whenever he becomes too like high strung about something, she will like instantly calm him down with like one statement. And it's like, oh, this is what he needed. Like,
Absolutely. So you went from, you know, academics being pushed in your family. You wanted to go to college for law.
Yeah.
You end up getting into NYU, going to NYU, and post college, you started going into social media marketing, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, at what point within your college experience were you interested in social media and
Yeah.
making the pivot from law?
So, like I said, like my parents really like because they came to this country because of their education, right? Like my dad came because he did his PhD and like that went viral. So they like always had this very like prioritization of education because they believed it would bring me and my brother way bigger opportunities in life. And
that's such a good mentality to have, and I respect that so much from you. I feel like so many like immigrant families like have that sort of work ethic when they come to the US, and it's amazing because it's so true. You are putting yourself in a different bracket when you get a college education, push yourself
100%.
academically, like try new things. Yeah.
The number of doors that have opened up for me literally because I went to NYU, like, and so like I went to NYU and I immediately within the first year I was like, yeah, I don't know if law is really for me. I remember just like doing all the like coursework, like the intro coursework, and just feeling disconnected from what I was learning. And I decided, why not like try pursuing just like on the side a couple art classes and seeing what happened. There was like a J term because NYU has January terms.
Right.
And I was like, let me try doing like a graphic design class and seeing if I liked it. I knew my parents would not be on board for me to switch whatever I was in. So I was like, let me like just try something and see how it goes. And I absolutely fell in love with the class. The teacher like loved my work, like, and was like, you have a talent for this, especially the branding side. There was like a whole project where we had to do a branding for a bookstore in the Lower East Side, and we created like proposals for that branding assignment, and mine was the one that was picked because the teacher thought it was really thoughtful, like all the little elements that I included.
Yeah.
And I walked away from that class just being like, wow, like of everything that I've done through my college career, being picked for that branding assignment was probably the most gratifying moment. And I was like, I wonder if there's a way that I could make this my full-time career. And ended up getting an internship as a like digital marketing assistant. And then that was also when like graphic design, social media, all of that stuff was under one bucket. And I really loved it. Ended up my senior year coming back and showing my resume to my advisor. And at that point, I had done like 4 or 5 like graphic design, social media related internships back to back to back because I was like, I need to prove to my parents that this is going to be something sustainable and that I can actually make money off of it. So like, I think 90% of those internships were actually paid. And I was like basically paying for my summer, like stay in the city and then doing all of these internships. So I came back and I was like, hey, can I switch my concentration? This was my senior year.
So you were still in a law concentration by senior year?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And like senior year is when you're supposed to start your thesis in my like degree. And my advisor was just like, you realize like you're not supposed, like nobody gets to switch at this point. And I was like, okay, well, here's my resume. And she was like, okay, well, none of this is related to law, so.
Right. I mean, I'm also so impressed just because, I mean, I feel like stereotypically when we talk about law, these classes are hard.
Yeah.
You know? So I'm so impressed that you were able to manage a law degree course load all while having these internships. And not just one internships. It sounds like you had a couple at the same time, right? Which I actually did the same thing when I was in college. So that's kind of wild. And it's not as common as you'd think, but it was a grind. And I was in like a marketing major. So it was so different. But mine wasn't like, that all made sense for the advertising jobs, but I would imagine, like, what was it like balancing your law course load with these internships? Also, different sides of the brain.
I wasn't doing so great on the law course load side. I like tried, but honestly, I was getting a lot of B's. Like, it just wasn't really my thing, and I think it showed. And
she let you switch. Eventually.
They were like, okay, like your whole resume is literally just like create like digital marketing, so we'll just switch you over. So then I ended up doing my thesis actually as like a short documentary series.
Wow.
And that also ended up giving me experience in video content creation because I ended up taking classes with Tish for documentary filmmaking, and that's how I learned how to like edit and shoot and like tell a story through your videos and content. So,
and for anybody listening that doesn't know what Tish is, it's basically the art school within NYU.
Yeah, like the film and art school. A lot of like big film producers could start at Tisch.
And musical artists too, right?
And
Or
musical
is that the
artists.
same school technically, or no?
Steinhardt
Is music. Yeah. I'm thinking like Maggie Rogers.
Yes, that's Steinhardt.
Okay,
She's a
Steinhardt.
yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, it was all those little steps. I don't know if I would have necessarily taken them in that order if I wasn't trying to fight for something different than what I had always expected out of my life. Like and a lot of like young brown people will comment on my TikToks like, how did you even like end up where you are today? And I'm like,
You're like, listen, it's a long story. So
it's a long story,
Yeah.
but I feel like at the end of it, it's just fighting for yourself. And if you're truly passionate and truly care about something, fight for those opportunities, because at the end of the day, you might be better at that thing that you think you are.
Yeah, 100%. And I think also, and I'm probably going to butcher the quote, or it's not even really a quote, just like the ethos of it. It's if something you do gives you energy and gives you purpose, then you have to fuel that fire, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm a big believer in like giving energy to something that gives you energy in return, you know?
Yeah.
And it's cool knowing that when you started out in that class, that was a creative class during your J term, and you were like, wow, I love this. This is like filling my cup in a way that my cup hasn't been filled before.
Yeah.
And then you lean in, you know, because like the universe has a weird way of showing you what you should be doing. And when you actually work towards those things and keep fueling that fire that feels good for you, it's amazing, like the
Yeah.
change that can happen.
I remember when I started college, one of my friends was like, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going into human rights. And my friend was just like, are you sure? And I was like, because everybody around me who knew me well, like, saw how much the creative work, like, one of my friends got initiated into a frat, and he wanted to paint his paddle like with the Versace print.
Yeah.
So he like paid me to do that for him.
Oh my
my
gosh.
freshman year, and like I had so much more fun doing that than like any course that I did that
Right.
year, you know? So like
Did you know growing up that you were good at art? Like, is that
Yeah.
something, so you did know that?
Yeah.
Okay. But it just wasn't what you were giving like all of your time and effort to. Cool.
Because like my parents they didn't see art as a career path. My dad is actually a really good artist. He drew all the figures for his marine biology courses. So like we have these really gorgeous detailed picture like drawings of fish
Yeah.
at home that he like made. I want to get one tattooed on me at some point,
Yeah.
but like
How many tattoos do you have?
that's a good question.
Like a lot?
Yeah.
When
have,
did you
like,
get your first tattoo?
You've seen it, the whole like sleeve.
No, I haven't.
I
Wait.
feel like at like the retreat.
Did I
It's
ask you
hard
about
to-
it?
No.
I don't think I've seen it. You have a sleeve?
I have like a whole sleeve.
I didn't know that. Wait, what? No, I swear to God, like somebody will have tattoos all over their hands and all over their arms, and then they'll say to me like, thinking about getting this new tattoo, and I'm like, wait, you have tattoos? And they're like, Keith, they're literally all over my fingers, and I'm like, I don't know how, but I just don't notice it.
Yeah.
Or like I notice it and I don't at the same time. I don't know what it is. Sometimes I just feel like I'm not a very observant person.
No, I get that. I'm like, I think a lot of people don't expect it, so they don't like register. But yeah, there's like a whole sleeve under here.
Are you the type of person that like gets a tattoo and there has to be like something meaningful to it, or will you just like a cool design and get it on your arm?
Kind of a mix. Like there are definitely some that are just like, there's no meaning, but there's like, most of them have meaning. The bigger pieces. I try to make sure the bigger ones are like meaningful, and then everything else is just kind of like filler.
Okay, we talked about how you have a conservative family.
Yeah.
How did they feel about you getting tattoos? I have to ask.
So my parents know they exist.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if my dad fully knows they exist. I've never had this conversation with him, so why poke the beast? You know, like there's no reason to like bring it up. My mom has brought it up, like she knows, and I just like have come to a place with her where I'm like, yeah, you can know. You don't ever have to see them.
Yeah.
If they're going to upset you, you don't ever have to see them.
Right.
So that's kind of like our middle ground.
Post-college, you ended up working in social media marketing, and you go from working in social media marketing for brands with businesses to then building your own personal brand. Talk to us about that transition and what made you finally make the jump and say, like, fuck it, I'm going full time and doing this myself?
Whenever I was in my internship era, I also was doing photography in the city. So I did like, basically, I just picked up a camera and started taking pictures of my friends, and that started to do well on Instagram. And I started to DM influencers. At the time, they weren't even called influencers yet. They were called like Instagram bloggers. And I started building connections with some girls. One of them worked for Pop Sugar at the time. I don't even think Pop Sugar exists anymore.
Yeah, I don't know.
But
I know exactly what you're talking about.
It was like one of those online magazines.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I used to do shoots with her pretty consistently. And she invited me to like New York Fashion Week and like a bunch of brand events. And I met a few other girls through that. And basically built a whole network of influencers who I was doing photo shoots for through the city. And I was making like side money from it. And I remember just like being so enamored by the influencer culture at the time and being like, wow, this is so cool. And like Fashion Week and seeing everybody walk and like just the way they were treated and like everything, I was like, whoa, this is like such a cool world. And I was like, okay, I definitely want to do social media marketing because I want to stay close to this space. So when I graduated, I ended up applying to like a bunch of social media marketing agencies. And it's funny, like when you were saying NYU is a good school, like one of the agencies I went into for an interview, the CEO didn't even like look at my qualifications. He saw NYU on my resume and was like, okay,
yeah,
let's give you a test run.
I mean, it's so fair. NYU is such a good school.
Yeah.
It's a very hard school to get into, you know? So it's impressive in its own right just to get into NYU, you know?
Thank
and then
you.
obviously have all the internships and really make the most out of your time there is the other really impressive part about
Thank
what you
you.
did. But okay.
I think it's like one of those things you don't realize at the time, especially at a young age, like how much college really like impacts that first job and how much that first job can really shape the rest of your career, because that's what really happened for me is being at that social media agency and being exposed to so many different brands across different verticals from like hospitality to food and beverage. It like really taught me about how brands use social media to communicate to their customers across different target audiences and all of the spaces.
What do you think about having been in the world of social media for so long, like, and really seeing, because I feel like over the past even like 5 years, it's amazing how much social media has changed and evolved and gotten even bigger. So I'm curious, like, having been working in it for a good chunk of time now, like, what are your thoughts on how it's evolved and what do you think is to come with social media?
It's a great question. I think there's a bunch of ways it's evolved, right? Like we see like the evolution from Facebook to Instagram to TikTok. My career has kind of been through that evolution and watching these new platforms come onto the scene and understanding how brands can use them for communicating their messages to their target audience and really making them work for them. But I think also on a cultural and social level, there's like a whole other layer that I see personally from seeing the influencer industry from like early on in 2016 to now. Like back then when I was doing those photo shoots, I never imagined myself being one of the people invited to one of those events.
Yeah.
And to actually like say I was an influencer. I like couldn't see myself in those spaces because I never really saw people who did the things that I did or who looked like me in those spaces. It was like always a very specific kind of like influencer who was invited to those things.
And it was so different at that time too. Like if I can remember like content creators back then, it was like the perfect photos, the perfect filter on the photos, the perfect aesthetic outfit wise.
Yeah.
And I feel the same as you. Or it was like the professional athletes, right? Like I remember taking like a PR class, and the teacher of the class was this guy that worked at Ketchum, which is a big PR agency. And he would bring in like people to speak at the class for basically every class. I was like, this is a nice job. You just bring someone in to do it. But anyways, he brought this one woman in that worked in influencer marketing at Ketchum. And I remember it just being all like the lifestyle creators are just described, and then also like the professional chefs and blah, blah, blah. And I felt the same way. I'm like, this is an amazing industry. It's so cool, but such a challenge to get into it.
And I think with like the genesis of a platform like TikTok, that really like allowed and like celebrated authenticity, and people all being different and having different walks of life and doing different things, but all those things being interesting. Like, I feel like fitness creators now have such a big platform and such a big voice compared to back then, because people are interested not only in like what you're wearing, but who you are and what you're doing.
I also feel like TikTok, and tell me if you feel this too, has allowed, and I feel like you and I are similar in like the running content that we create, in the sense that like we just want to show that running and fitness doesn't have to be so intense.
Yeah.
It can be fun. It can be an adventure when you're in New York City running around. Like, it's always an adventure. You can run to Tompkins Square Park and get the Chief Preethi bagel. But I feel like TikTok has kind of opened the door for that type of fitness content, because I remember like back in the day on Instagram, it was like, do you remember like Kayla It Science, who's amazing?
Yes.
Loved her workouts, but that was a very intense kind of, you have to work out a certain way and you have to look a certain way, and it's all about getting your body to look X whatever. I just feel like TikTok has really opened, exactly what we said, the door within the fitness community too, to being more authentic and showing that like you don't have to be so intense to be somebody that like talks about fitness and works out, and you know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, my running videos aren't about like being the fastest or the best at running. It's just about
That's
this is
how I
my
feel.
run, and this is how it felt, and it was really fun.
Yeah.
And I'd like to share it with you guys.
At what point did you then make the switch from working in social
Yeah.
media to personal brand?
It was also around the same time TikTok came onto the scene. There was a brand that I was working for, and they really wanted to make TikTok work for them. And actually, the first time that I downloaded and created my own TikTok was because I was working for a brand that I was not the target demographic for at all. They were a men's hair loss startup.
Okay. Classic. Love
I
that.
was like, I know I can't be the face of this brand. Like, there is absolutely no way. I don't want to be the face of this brand.
Okay.
But I knew we had to figure out how to make TikTok work for us to stay culturally relevant. So I was like, okay, let me create my own account and just start doing the things that other people seem to be doing. And at the time, it happened to be like a lot of like dance trends or like little things like that. But I was like, oh, this is interesting. And that kind of made me start using the tools and the platform a little bit. And then after that role, I moved on to like a food and beverage industry client, and they were a startup, and the CEO gave me budget to hire 2 interns. And those interns I learned so much from, and they really showed me kind of what video production in terms of like TikTok as Gen Z looks like. I think I always thought I had a grasp of it, but like the younger generation really knows a lot more about technology.
With every millennial cusper, there's a Gen Z counterpart. Like, we need Gen Z, Gen Alpha. Like, they're amazing at content. Yeah.
I know. I want to make friends with someone in Gen Alpha now. I'm like, I need a Gen Alpha.
Same. I'm like, where are they? We need to know them. Go to the Lower East Side.
But I learned kind of a little bit about what's trending, how to film properly, and started applying that to my own content still, because as much as I was creating content for this brand, I still enjoyed doing my own thing and like keeping up my own channels and testing things out there before I posted it on the brand account. And actually, funny enough, one of the videos I made for the brand was an early version of my vlogs, and it totally bombed. Like, it did not perform well for the brand at all. But then when I started doing my own thing, I was just kind of like, I feel like I can do that concept but better. And I just doubled down on this like idea of this like vlog with the transitions that makes it feel, my like inspo behind it was, do you remember Birdman? Everybody was like raving about it because it was like a one-shot film.
Okay. Oh,
and
I didn't know
that
that.
was kind of the inspo behind the like flip vlogs, was to make it feel like a music video that was like taken in one shot, because the transitions make it so seamless. So,
And for anybody listening, you need to go right now and pull out your phone and go to TikTok and just look at Preethi's videos, because then you'll really understand what she's talking about. Like, your transition style is so sick.
thank you. I appreciate that a lot. It took
It's true.
a long time to get to like where I am today, and sometimes it's still not perfect.
It like throws me sometimes, the transitions. I'm like, whoa. Yeah.
That feels good. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, cool, I'm doing it right. It's fun. Then I made my style and it went viral, and I applied it to running too, and then that went even more viral. And I actually 2023, I applied to get into the New York City Marathon through the lottery and I didn't get in. And I was super bummed. And then after my first running video went viral, New Balance reached out to me and invited me to run with them.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
And that was my first ever marathon, which I bombed.
The first time I ran the New York City Marathon, I hit the wall at mile 18 so hard. And it was like raining this year when I ran it. I was in college. I was like training for the whole thing on treadmills, which was like just silly because I lived right next to Central Park. It was like, girl, what are you doing? You know?
Yeah.
And oh my God, I remember it being so tough.
I feel like you don't realize how tough it is because you're like, oh, 26 miles. But then you realize 26 miles all uphill across bridges.
Brutal. Like, so brutal.
So brutal. I've heard
Yeah.
New York apparently is one of the it's like the second toughest, if not the toughest of all the
Yeah.
world majors.
It's definitely not a qualifying race. Yeah. I remember being so mad at myself the last time I ran it. I ran it for the last time in 2021. And I was like in such good shape. Like I felt like I could have done it faster than I did it in. And I had so many people say to me, they were like, you should have just ran like a qualifying race like a couple weeks before doing the New York City Marathon one, you know? And now I like go back and I'm like, maybe next time. Like,
Yeah.
the New York City Marathon is just so fun. I'm like not one of those people
is
that can
very
do
fun.
multiple marathons in a row. I feel like that's just a lot on the knees. Did you do Chicago right before New York?
No,
Okay.
but I applied for both Chicago and Berlin lotteries.
And
knocking
you
on
won it.
wood.
Yeah, yeah.
That's for 2025. Let's see.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about your running career because I think it's so cool that you were into running during college. You had a go-to route that you loved doing. You graduated, you got into kickboxing, and then you started running, right?
Yeah, I graduated college. I stopped taking care of myself, picked up kickboxing, and it was really therapeutic, but also I think I grew up not really thinking of myself as powerful. My parents always joke I was the princess of the household. My dad and my mom and my brother really take care of me and look after me, and my brother is the sweetest person and opens the doors when me and my mom are going into the car and things like that. So I have been treated like a princess most of my life, and I'm so thankful for that. But because of that, I just never really thought of myself as fierce or strong. And I think kickboxing really showed me you can be strong. It's something you build. It's not something that you're born with.
No.
I mean, for some people, yes, they're naturally athletic, they're naturally strong, but it's
But
also
even if
something-
you're naturally athletic, that's a whole new thing.
yeah,
You have to really learn the skills and the moves and
Yeah.
how to make it all work and have the right form.
Yeah. And once you start learning those things and you feel it click, it's just so empowering. I started to feel my body feel stronger too. And I was like, wow, this feels so good. I don't want to stop. And once the pandemic hit, my gym at the time shut down and a lot of gyms in the city did. So there wasn't really access to places to continue the Muay Thai training. And I was like,
I love that. That's what you do. Yeah.
I was like, oh, let me try running again. Because I remember when I was running feeling a similar kind of high of
Post-run high.
yeah, of just accomplishing something,
Absolutely.
you know?
Yeah.
So I started running. I remember the first time that I started running when I picked it back up, I ran from my apartment in Bushwick to the Williamsburg waterfront, and it was the toughest run ever. I was dying. It was 2.5 miles, and I took a picture of the bridge when I got there because I was I felt so accomplished in myself for doing that.
Yeah.
And it's funny to think about that now because my favorite place to run in the entirety of New York City is Williamsburg Bridge. And then my brother saw my Strava, encouraged me to do the Philly half, and I was hooked after my first race.
So your running journey really picked up post-college, right, as an
Yeah.
adult, which I think is amazing. And I think for everybody listening, running is something that you can get into at any stage in life.
Yeah.
And I see so many amazing runners. One of the best runners that I've ever ran with, shout out Bex Gentry, she's a Peloton instructor. She got into running at 27.
Wow.
You know, and that is so impressive to me. And it just shows, and she's a sub-3 marathoner. She's amazing, you know, and you don't have to be a sub-3 marathoner to be a runner. But I'm curious for everybody listening, what are your tips for getting into running and sticking with it?
For me, what's really helped is having a fire playlist. Like every song that you absolutely love, just put it all in one playlist. It doesn't even have to matter if they match, if they're the same vibe. You can go from Gracie Abrams to Tyler the Creator. No one's going to judge you because it's just for you. Whatever gets you hype in the morning, put that on. And it, like, for me personally, that's really what motivates me to get out there.
I feel like you need to have more music partnerships, right? You're creative, you love social media, marketing, etc., art, but you also love music, right?
Yeah, I actually grew up playing, like, I think there was a point in my life where I was playing like 6 instruments.
Oh my
I
God,
played,
what
like,
instruments?
Piano, violin, viola, guitar, ukulele.
That is so impressive.
I played flute for a hot second.
Oh my God, Preethi, what? So you have a big musical background. That's insane.
I have a violin in my apartment, and when my friends get me drunk enough and we go home, the lady will have the violin.
Wait, so the violin's like one of the hardest instruments to play. I'm literally so shook right now. Violin's my favorite. I need you fucking jamming on the violin right now. Why didn't I know this? This is so cool.
My mom really loves music, and it was something that she wished she could have learned growing up. So as soon, like, literally, like, I think we were like 4 when we started learning the piano. And yeah, like, my mom was just like drilled it into us, which, like, when I was like a child, I hated learning instruments, but then, like, by middle school, high school, I became like an orchestra dork, and it took over my whole personality. And I was like, oh, so that's why I was like way more artsy in high school than athlete.
So it's so interesting that you went to school and you were like, I'm going to be a lawyer. Yeah. You had this like really artistic side of you.
Yeah.
It all makes sense. All right, I'm curious, like right now, what are the songs on your hype playlist? What's the genre? Are we rap?
Really just Tyler the Creator's whole album. I like, honestly, I do this thing where every single month I make a new playlist, and it's like just songs that I'm listening to on repeat.
That's what I do. I listen on repeat. It's like sickening.
Yeah.
How much,
It was like Look Like Him. Like, it's from Tyler's new album, but then I was like going through the playlist and I was like, oh, this is literally just his whole album in one playlist.
Do you ever do silent runs?
No, they scare me.
What about podcast runs?
I haven't done a podcast run either.
I love podcast runs.
Even like when we got on the treadmills, I almost asked you if I could play music in 1 year because I was like, I know like it would help me a little bit with like.
That was one of the questions
forward.
I was going to ask you in the pop question round is do you wish you were listening to music right now? Because I was wondering that because so I'm like I sometimes will go for a silent run. It just depends. But because sometimes I'm like, if I've been overstimulated, I need to just like sit with my thoughts.
Yeah.
And sometimes if I'm listening to music, it'll like crowd my headspace, which is like so crazy because like I feel like I used to only be able to listen to music. Mm-hmm. And then I think once I started listening to podcasts when I was running, I was able to then go from like music to podcasts while running to then no music.
Silent.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it just depends on the day.
Maybe I need to listen to your podcast while I run.
You should listen to this episode while you run. This is a good episode. Yeah. Okay. As we start wrapping up, you just ran the New York City Marathon. Mm-hmm. You're making amazing content. You're popping off. What is next for Preethi? What can we be excited about? Tell me.
Tokyo 2025.
Let's go.
In March.
Oh my God. That's so soon.
Yeah. That's why I think I'm going to go to LA in January because I am not trying to do my 20 18-mile runs in New York during that winter.
No.
That
do them by the beach.
Terrible. Do them by the beach.
I'll do I'm going to be in LA for the month of January also, so we should do a long run together.
Yes.
So you guys can look out for Preethi and Kate 2.0. Yeah. And if you're listening to this podcast and you haven't yet seen the Treadmill Show, go watch our Treadmill Show episode. Make sure you're following Preethi and I across socials.
Yep.
Thank you so much to everybody listening. We love you so freaking much. You're the only reason why this podcast is possible. And yeah, stay tuned for our next episode. Love you guys.